a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. René Descartes. René Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist, a native of the Kingdom of France. He spent about 20 years of his life in the Dutch Republic after serving for a while in the Dutch States Army of Maurice of Nassau, Prince of Orange and the Stadtholder of the United Provinces. He is generally considered one of the most notable intellectual representatives of the Dutch Golden Age. Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy continues to be a standard text at most university philosophy departments. Descartes' influence in mathematics is equally apparent. The Cartesian coordinate system was named after him. He is credited as the father of analytical geometry, the bridge between algebra and geometry, used in the discovery of infinitesimal calculus and analysis. Descartes was also one of the key figures in the scientific revolution. Descartes refused to accept the authority of previous philosophers. He frequently set his views apart from those of his predecessors. In the opening section of The Passions of the Soul, an early modern treatise on emotions, Descartes goes so far as to assert that he will write on this topic, as if no one had written on these matters before. His best-known philosophical statement is, "I think, therefore I am," found in Discourse on the Method and Principles of Philosophy. Many elements of his philosophy have precedence in late Aristotelianism, the revived Stoicism of the 16th century, or in earlier philosophers like Augustine. In his natural philosophy, he differed from the schools on two major points. First, he rejected the splitting of corporeal substance into matter and form. Second, he rejected any appeal to final ends, divine or natural, in explaining natural phenomena. In his theology, he insists on the absolute freedom of God's act of creation. Descartes laid the foundation for 17th-century continental rationalism, later advocated by Spinoza and Leibniz, and opposed by the empiricist school of thought consisting of Hobbes, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume. Leibniz, Spinoza, and Descartes were all well-versed in mathematics as well as philosophy, and Descartes and Leibniz contributed greatly to science as well. Early life. René Descartes was born in La Haye-Antoine, France, on the 31st of March 1596. His mother, Jeanne Brichard, died soon after giving birth to him, and so he was not expected to survive. Descartes' father, Joachim, was a member of the Parlement of Brittany at Rennes. René lived with his grandmother and with his great-uncle. Although the Descartes family was Roman Catholic, the Poitou region was controlled by the Protestant Huguenots. In 1607, late, because of his fragile health, he entered the Jesuit Collège Royal Henri Legrand at La Flèche, where he was introduced to mathematics and physics, including Galileo's work. After graduation in 1614, he studied for 2 years at the University of Poitiers, earning a baccalaureate and license in canon and civil law in 1616, in accordance with his father's wishes that he should become a lawyer. From there he moved to Paris. In Discourse on the Method, Descartes recalls, "I entirely abandoned the study of letters, resolving to seek no knowledge other than that of which could be found in myself or else in the great book of the world. I spent the rest of my youth traveling, visiting courts and armies, mixing with people of diverse temperaments and ranks, gathering various experiences, testing myself in the situations which fortune offered me, and at all times reflecting upon whatever came my way so as to derive some profit from it." Given his ambition to become a professional military officer, in 1618, Descartes joined, as a mercenary, the Protestant Dutch States Army in Breda under the command of Maurice of Nassau, and undertook a formal study of military engineering, as established by Simon Stevin. Descartes, therefore, received much encouragement in Breda to advance his knowledge of mathematics. In this way, he became acquainted with Isaac Beeckman, the principal of a Dordrecht school, for whom he wrote the Compendium of Music. Together they worked on free fall, catenary, conic section, and fluid statics. Both believed that it was necessary to create a method that thoroughly linked mathematics and physics. While in the service of the Catholic Duke Maximilian of Bavaria since 1619, Descartes was present at the Battle of the White Mountain outside Prague, in November 1620. Visions. According to Adrien Baillet, on the night of 11th of November 1619, while stationed in Neuburg and der Donau, Descartes shut himself in a room with an oven to escape the cold. While within, he had 3 dreams, and believed that a divine spirit revealed to him a new philosophy. However, it is likely that what Descartes considered to be his second dream was actually an episode of exploding head syndrome. Upon exiting, he had formulated analytical geometry and the idea of applying a mathematical method to philosophy. He concluded from these visions that the pursuit of science would prove to be, for him, the pursuit of true wisdom, and a central part of his life's work. Descartes also saw very clearly that all truths were linked with one another, so that finding a fundamental truth and proceeding with logic would open the way to all science. Descartes discovered this basic truth quite soon, his famous, "I think, therefore I am." France. In 1620 Descartes left the army. He visited Basilica della Santa Casa in Loreto, then visited various countries before returning to France, and during the next few years spent time in Paris. It was there that he composed his first essay on method, Reguli ad directionem ingenii. He arrived in La Haye in 1623, selling all of his property to invest in bonds, which provided a comfortable income for the rest of his life. Descartes was present at the siege of La Rochelle by Cardinal Richelieu in 1627. In the fall of the same year, in the residence of the papal nuncio Guidi di Bagno, where he came with Mersenne and many other scholars to listen to a lecture given by the alchemist Nicolas de Villiers, Sieur de Chandoux, on the principles of a supposed new philosophy. Cardinal Beryl urged him to write an exposition of his own new philosophy in some location beyond the reach of the Inquisition. Netherlands. Descartes returned to the Dutch Republic in 1628. In April 1629 he joined the University of Franeker, studying under Adriaan Metius, living either with a Catholic family or renting the Stadtholder, where he invited in vain a French cook and an optician. The next year, under the name Poot von, he enrolled at the Leiden University to study mathematics with Jacobus Golius, who confronted him with Popper's hexagon theorem, and astronomy with Martin Hortensius. In October 1630 he had a falling out with Beekman, whom he accused of plagiarizing some of his ideas. In Amsterdam, he had a relationship with a servant girl, Helena Jans van der Strom, with whom he had a daughter, Francine, who was born in 1635 in Deventer. She died of scarlet fever at the age of 5. Unlike many moralists of the time, Descartes was not devoid of passions, but rather defended them. He wept upon Francine's death in 1640. Descartes said that he did not believe that one must refrain from tears to prove oneself a man. Russell Shorto postulated that the experience of fatherhood and losing a child formed a turning point in Descartes' work, changing its focus from medicine to a quest for universal answers. Despite frequent moves, he wrote all his major work during his 20-plus years in the Netherlands, where he managed to revolutionize mathematics and philosophy. In 1633, Galileo was condemned by the Catholic Church, and Descartes abandoned plans to publish treatises on the world, his work of the previous 4 years. Nevertheless, in 1637 he published part of this work in 3 essays, Les Météores, La Dioptrique, and La Géométrie, preceded by an introduction, his famous Discours de la méthode. In it, Descartes lays out 4 rules of thought, meant to ensure that our knowledge rests upon a firm foundation. In La Géométrie, Descartes exploited the discoveries he made with Pierre de Fermat, having been able to do so because his paper, Introduction to Loci, was published posthumously in 1679. This later became known as Cartesian geometry. Descartes continued to publish works concerning both mathematics and philosophy for the rest of his life. In 1641 he published a metaphysics work, Meditations de prima philosophia, written in Latin and thus addressed to the learned. It was followed, in 1644, by Principia Philosophiae, a kind of synthesis of the discourse on the method, and Meditations on first philosophy. In 1643, Cartesian philosophy was condemned at the University of Utrecht, and Descartes was obliged to flee to The Hague, and settled in Ekman-Binnen. Descartes began a long correspondence with Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, devoted mainly to moral and psychological subjects. Connected with this correspondence, in 1649 he published Les Passions de l'âme, that he dedicated to the princess. In 1647, he was awarded a pension by the Louis XIV of France, though it was never paid. A French translation of Principia Philosophiae, prepared by Abbot Claude Picot, was published in 1647. This edition Descartes also dedicated to Princess Elizabeth. In the preface to the French edition, Descartes praised true philosophy as a means to attain wisdom. He identifies four ordinary sources to reach wisdom and finally says that there is a fifth, better and more secure, consisting in the search for first causes. Sweden. By 1649, Descartes had become famous throughout Europe for being one of the continent's greatest philosophers and scientists. That year, Queen Christina of Sweden invited Descartes to her court and to organize a new scientific academy and tutor her in his ideas about love. She was interested in and stimulated Descartes to publish the Passions of the Soul, a work based on his correspondence with Princess Elizabeth. Descartes accepted, and moved to Sweden in the middle of winter. He was a guest at the house of Pierre Schonat, living on Vasterlanggatan, less than 500 meters from Tre Kronor in Stockholm. There, Schonat and Descartes made observations with a Dorichelian barometer, a tube with mercury, challenging Blaise Pascal. Descartes took the first set of barometric readings in Stockholm to see if atmospheric pressure could be used in forecasting the weather. Death. Descartes apparently started giving lessons to Queen Christina after her birthday, 3 times a week, at 5 a.m., in her cold and draughty castle. Soon it became clear they did not like each other. She did not like his mechanical philosophy, nor did he appreciate her interest in ancient Greek. By the 15th of January 1650, Descartes had seen Christina only 4 or 5 times. On the 1st of February he contracted pneumonia and died on the 11th of February. The cause of death was pneumonia according to Schonat, but pneumonia according to the Dr. Van Wallen, who was not allowed to bleed him. In 1996 C. Pies, a German scholar, published a book questioning this account, based on a letter by Johann Van Wallen, who had been sent by Christina to treat him, something Descartes refused, and more arguments against its veracity have been raised since. Descartes might have been assassinated as he asked for an emetic, wine mixed with tobacco, as a Catholic in a Protestant nation. He was interred in a graveyard used mainly for orphans in Adolf Fredrikskirke in Stockholm. His manuscripts came into the possession of Claude Clauselier, Schonat's brother-in-law, and a devout Catholic who has begun the process of turning Descartes into a saint by cutting, adding and publishing his letters selectively. In 1663, the Pope placed his works on the Index of Prohibited Books. In 1666 his remains were taken to France and buried in the Saint-Étienne-du-Mont. In 1671 Louis XIV prohibited all the lectures in Cartesianism. Although the National Convention in 1792 had planned to transfer his remains to the Panthéon, he was reburied in the Abbey of Saint-Germain-des-Prés in 1819, missing a finger and skull. His skull is on display in the Musée de l'Homme in Paris. Philosophical work. Initially, Descartes arrives at only a single first principle, I think. Thought cannot be separated from me, therefore, I exist. Most famously, this is known as cogito ergo sum. Therefore, Descartes concluded, if he doubted, then something or someone must be doing the doubting. Therefore the very fact that he doubted proved his existence. The simple meaning of the phrase is that if one is skeptical of existence, that is in and of itself proof that he does exist. These two first principles, I think and I exist, were later confirmed by Descartes' clear and distinct perception, that I clearly and distinctly perceive these two principles. Descartes reasoned, ensures their indubitability. Descartes concludes that he can be certain that he exists, because he thinks. But in what form? He perceives his body through the use of the senses. However, these have previously been unreliable. So Descartes determines that the only indubitable knowledge is that he is a thinking thing. Thinking is what he does, and his power must come from his essence. Descartes defines thought as what happens in me such that I am immediately conscious of it, insofar as I am conscious of it. Thinking is thus every activity of a person of which the person is immediately conscious. He gave reasons for thinking that waking thoughts are distinguishable from dreams, and that one's mind cannot have been hijacked by an evil demon placing an illusory external world before one's senses. In this manner, Descartes proceeds to construct a system of knowledge, discarding perception as unreliable and, instead, admitting only deduction as a method. Dualism. Descartes, influenced by the automatons on display throughout the city of Paris, began to investigate the connection between the mind and body, and how the two interact. His main influences for dualism were theology, and physics. The theory on the dualism of mind and body is Descartes' signature doctrine and permeates other theories he advanced. Known as Cartesian dualism, his theory on the separation between the mind and the body went on to influence subsequent Western philosophies. In Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes attempted to demonstrate the existence of God and the distinction between the human soul and the body. Humans are a union of mind and body. Thus Descartes' dualism embraced the idea that mind and body are distinct, but closely joined. While many contemporary readers of Descartes found the distinction between mind and body difficult to grasp, he thought it was entirely straightforward. Perhaps a testament to the certainty clear and distinct perception afforded him, Descartes employed the concept of modes. Which are the ways in which substances exist. In Principles of Philosophy, Descartes explained, we can clearly perceive a substance apart from the mode which we say differs from it, whereas we cannot, conversely. Understand the mode apart from the substance. To perceive a mode apart from its substance requires an intellectual abstraction, which Descartes explained as follows: the intellectual abstraction consists in my turning my thought away from one part of the contents of this richer idea the better to apply it to the other part with greater attention. Thus, when I consider a shape without thinking of the substance or the extension whose shape it is, I make a mental abstraction. According to Descartes, two substances are really distinct when each of them can exist apart from the other. Thus Descartes reasoned that God is distinct from humans, and the body and mind of a human are also distinct from one another. He argued that the great differences between body and mind make the two ontologically distinct, but that the mind was utterly indivisible. Because, when I consider the mind, or myself insofar as I am merely a thinking thing, I am unable to distinguish any part within myself. I understand myself to be something quite single and complete. In Meditations, Descartes discussed a piece of wax and exposed the single most characteristic doctrine of Cartesian dualism, that the universe contained two radically different kinds of substances, the mind, or soul defined as thinking, and the body defined as matter and unthinking. The Aristotelian philosophy of Descartes' days held that the universe was inherently purposeful or theological. Everything that happened, be it the motion of the stars or the growth of a tree, was supposedly explainable by a certain purpose, goal or end that worked its way out within nature. Aristotle called this the final cause. And these final causes were indispensable for explaining the ways nature operated. With his theory on dualism, Descartes fired the opening shot for the battle between the traditional Aristotelian science and the new science of Kepler and Galileo, which denied the final cause for explaining nature. Descartes' dualism provided the philosophical rationale for the latter, and he expelled the final cause from the physical universe. For Descartes, the only place left for the final cause was the mind. Therefore, while Cartesian dualism paved the way for modern physics, it also held the door open for religious beliefs about the immortality of the soul. Descartes' dualism of mind and matter implied a concept of human beings. A human was, according to Descartes, a composite entity of mind and body. Descartes gave priority to the mind and argued that the mind could exist without the body, but the body could not exist without the mind. In Meditations, Descartes even argues that while the mind is a substance, the body is composed only of accidents. But he did argue that mind and body are closely joined. Nature also teaches me, by the sensations of pain, hunger, thirst and so on. That I am not merely present in my body as a pilot in his ship, but that I am very closely joined and, as it were, intermingled with it, so that I and the body form a unit. If this were not so, I, who am nothing but a thinking thing, would not feel pain when the body was hurt, but would perceive the damage purely by the intellect, just as a sailor perceives by sight if anything in his ship is broken. Descartes' discussion on embodiment raised one of the most perplexing problems of his dualism philosophy. What exactly is the relationship of union between the mind and the body of a person? Therefore, Cartesian dualism set the agenda for philosophical discussion of the mind-body problem for many years after Descartes' death. Descartes was also a rationalist and believed in the power of innate ideas. Descartes argued the theory of innate knowledge and that all humans were born with knowledge through the higher power of God. It was this theory of innate knowledge that later led philosopher John Locke to combat the theory of empiricism, which held that all knowledge is acquired through experience. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries.